What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh video and back with another format guide, which is what I call the videos where I basically go through all the new cards added to a given format that make the format unique. Now, today I'm going to be covering X-Saber Format, which is the format based around YCS Philadelphia in October of 2010, and it comes off the heels of Frog Format, which was a format of all time. It was a format where Frog FDK is sort of dominant in the metagame, so not really one that many people play. But a lot of people have, started playing this format recently and started to enjoy it as well. So we actually had a tournament for this on the YGO from Zero Discord server, linked in the description down below, and it was really fun. And so we're going to be diving into it on the channel, seeing how this format works, what makes it tick, and the decks that you can play in it. But before we get into that, we got to cover the lists that this format uses and the new cards added to the format from Frog Format. So if you're watching all of these sort of guide videos in order, you'll basically get to see the full filling in of Yu-Gi-Oh's card pool over time, which is kind of cool. But anyways, let's start with the Forbidden List first for this format, which is based around the September 2010 TCG Forbidden List here. And this list made some very necessary changes from Frog Format. Namely, Substode is now banned, so Frog FDK cannot do its huge combo, getting a ton of frogs in grave, to then Ronin Tonin back a bunch of bodies for like Mass Driver. So I think this is a good hit. Substode is just a really good card in general. I mean, you see that in Frog decks just throughout the 5Ds era, where Substode is a linchpin of those decks and is extremely, extremely good in them. It's not the only new change here on the Forbidden List. There were some other cards added to it. Rescue Cat is another big one that was causing, I mean, not too many issues in Frog Form specifically, but throughout the 5Ds era, it's just an OTK enabler, or just an enabler for a lot of decks that is probably best curbed a bit here. We've got BrainCon also on the list now, which I'm sure that if you've ever played an Edison format and lost to this guy, you're pretty happy to see this thing here. So it's just one more Saki card that was taken out the back and, dealt with here on the list. Now, that being said, this isn't perfect. They take away one Saki one of, and they give you back another, as we shall see later. But I am glad to see this one gone. Heavy Storm is a bit more of a controversial new addition to the Forbidden List here, as some people really like this format, or this card being in a format, because it means that you can't just set all your back row and be fine with that. I will say that, there are ways to blow up a bunch of back row, like Black Rose Dragon is legal. So if you've got a deck that can go into that still threatens just setting all your back row. But I will say that Heavy Storm is the big punish. And also, you can probably set back row that can disrupt a Black Rose Dragon being formed at all. So Heavy being hit, it depends on whether you like Heavy being around in the format or not for balance purposes. But it is definitely interesting that they chose to hit this after all this time, and we'll have to see how the format develops with that being here. Temple of Kings is actually a card that I don't believe was released in the TCG at the time of this list, but they had to add it here because it was doing so good in the OCG. So this thing is here. It's basically a new card that lets you activate trap cards the turn they're set. This is the errated version of the text, but it not even being in the format and also being banned means that you don't really need to worry about that or the rest of it. That lets you, bring out Mystical Beast of Circuit or something. Or I guess you send the Mystical Beast of Circuit and then you special summon a monster or fusion. I don't know. It's a weird card that never really popped up that much in the TCG. And since it's on the ban list, we don't need to worry about it here. That's going to do it for the cards added to the list. I will say, in general, when learning new format, the Forbidden List is not necessarily the most important section of the list to, study intensely, as these cards will not pop up in your game, so you don't really need to worry about them that much. But if you are worried about, what might be in this format, the hand reps like Comfy, Delinquent Duo, and Force of Sentry are not in the format. We don't have things like Crush Card, like a lot of the GX era had. The Chaos Monsters in the forms of BLS and CD are not in the format, although Chaos Stork is. So, I think there are generally a lot of good things on this list, and I'm happy to see them here. But there are also some things that were taken off the list as well that, are a bit worrying to see in the format, but we'll have to see exactly how they do. Those worrying cards can be found on the limited list, which is much more important when diving into a new format, exploring the limited list, as these cards could potentially pop up in your games. And so you do need to know about them and keep an eye out for them, both in terms of building your own decks and also building some decks later. So I will be going through these one at a time, just alphabetical order, I think, will make it go quickest. I'm talking about why this is on the list and, whether you should include it in a given deck or not. Blackwing Gale the Whirlwind is just a really good, low attack tuner, so you can search it off Sangan or a bunch of other searchers. And being able to just have your opponent's monster attack is very good, but also in Blackwing specifically, having more than one of this could get out of hand really quickly. So it is good that this thing is at 1. Card Trooper is a just really good body. You bring it out, you get some mills off, which a lot of decks like. It's 1900 attack, which is a pretty decent attack stat. Draws you a card when it's destroyed, so that's an added bonus there too. So this thing's been limited for quite some time, and for good reason, in my opinion. Dark Dragon is great for dark decks. Honestly, this thing could be banned with how powerful it is. Just, if you get 3 Darks Engraved, you get to bring this thing out, pop the board, big body as well. So this thing is extremely, extremely good. And when playing against a deck that plays Dark Monsters, you do have to keep an eye on their graveyard precisely for this card. Elemental Year Stratos is great with decks that employ the hero engine, as it gets a free search of a hero, and also can potentially pop some back row if you want to use other effect there instead. Glare Beast Bestiari is great in Glad Beast decks, because this goes into their fusion monster Geyserus. If you can deal with this, the deck loses a lot of its teeth. So like if you bottomless it or something like that. But if the Gladiator player is a good player, they'll probably try and protect this thing somewhat, or only go into it when they're going for the Geyserus, or use like a Prisma to get in the grave and go around it that way. Just a very good card for Glad Beast deck in general, and it's good to know about if you're worried about facing that matchup, or if you want to play the deck yourself. Gores is just a really good buy to have in hand. It's a hand trap, so your opponent attacks you directly, you get to drop it, and get a big guy out to potentially wreck their stuff up next turn. So very, very good card, and most decks should be playing this thing. Lumina Lightsworn Summoner is a level 3 Lightsworn monster that lets you basically summon back Lightsworn monsters from grave, which is very, very good. And so it's good that this thing is on here. Probably good to not have Lightsworns have this tool. Marshmallow is also here. It's a burn card that's a bit hard to get rid of, so that's why it's here. Does it need to be here? I'd say probably not, but it is good to know about if you're facing a burn deck that they might have this. Mizuki is a good zombie monster. It gets to bring out other zombies from grave, which is what zombies want to be doing, so it makes sense why it's here. Mindmaster is a psychic monster that can potentially set up some OTKs, which you obviously don't necessarily want in the format. So that's why it is limited. We got Morphing Jar here for empty jar decks, which were decks that tried to mill out your opponent. Are those decks that good in this format? Not really, but this thing is here, just kind of a relic of the past for the list. We get Necrogardener here. It's just a great way to block your opponent's attacks, and especially in decks that mill like Lightsworn. So this is here to limit the power of that sort of interaction. Necroface is here because there are sort of Necroface mill decks that you can do as well. And so just limiting this thing prevents those decks from being able to do what they want to do. Neospatian Greymole is here because it's just a annoying monster to deal with. Kind of like Marshmallow, honestly. Like, some of these cards are here not because of their power level, but because of their annoyingness level. This thing, if you get tempo on your opponent and you just keep bringing this out, bouncing whatever they bring out, it can be very annoying for them to deal with. So very, very good card in the right circumstances. Night Assailant's mainly here because if it was at 2, you could do an infinite loop by pitching this thing to get back another Night Assailant. So it's basically a free discard fodder at that point, which they don't want in the game. Plague Spare Zombies here because this is a really good recurrent tuner monster, so you can use this thing to go into something and then bring it back later for something else, or if you mill this thing, you bring it back very easily. So again, it's kind of like Necrogardener. It is a resource in the graveyard that if there were more than one of this thing, it would probably be a bit too powerful. Rescue Cat should not be here. That was my mistake, so let's just remove it there and continue with the list. Sangan's here because it's a great searcher, and yeah, it's just a great searcher. It's universal, basically, as long as the monster has 1500 less attack, which a lot of good monsters do, as we've already seen from this section of the list. This card is very, very good for that reason. We got Spirit Reaper here, just another monster like Marshmallow, really annoying to deal with, and also it can get in for spam, which is very nice as well. We've got Summoner Monk, kind of like Rescue Cat. The two are paired together because this thing can OTK quite easily with Rescue Cat. In certain circumstances, of course, Dark Strike Fighter is banned. But, there are other things you can do with this card, so it's probably best to err on the side of caution and not make it too accessible. Dragoedia here is basically kind of like Gores in terms of just being able to come out and, punish your opponent for attacking in too, easily. And this thing is a very, very good card like Gores for recovering when you're on the back foot there. For the spells, we've got an Advanced Ritual Art here. Just very good in certain demise decks, I guess. But honestly, those decks are not really that good, so this probably could be unlimited. but it's still here based on what happened before, which is the same with a lot of cards in this, honestly, like Morphing Jar. Allure of Darkness here because for Dark decks, this would be very good at just increasing consistency. Black Whirlwind is a new limit here. This thing was semi in past formats, but this is just a very good consistency booster for Black Wings, which are already a really good deck, so it makes sense why you'd hit this. We've got Burial from a Different Dimension here, which is really good in certain graveyard-focused decks like Value Turbo and Zombies as well, so it's good to have this down to 1. Card Destruction is here for, honestly, kind of like Empty Jar decks again, just in certain mill decks that can be very annoying to have around. So they want to limit the consistency of this sort of thing. We got Charge of the Light Brigade here, also at 1 to limit the consistency of Lightsworn. We've got Cold Wave here to limit the power of certain ODTA decks that would just Cold Wave and then kill you through that. We got Dark here, newly limited. This thing was banned, but I guess because they got rid of Heavy Storm, they're like, we need some board wipes in the format, so they brought back Dark Hole. I don't necessarily think Dark Hole is that bad to have around in the format. Again, it's like Heavy Storm. A lot of people don't mind Heavy Storm because it basically makes people play a bit more conservatively with their back row. The same thing with Darkhold and Monsters. And honestly, Monsters, it's a lot easier to just spam out a bunch of monsters in this format with certain synchro decks and things like that than it is to just set a bunch of back row, because back row, you need like 1 back row per thing you're putting in the back row. Monsters, you don't necessarily need that because they can go into certain combos that can give you more monsters than you might have expected. So I do think that bring Darkhold back is not a bad thing at all. We got Destiny Draw here at 1 copy as well to limit the power of certain deep draw Destiny decks, I guess. But yeah, honestly, this is also kind of a relic of a previous time. E-Tele is here because of Teledad format, honestly, and this thing was very good then, just being able to bring out a Psychic Tuner very easily. I think, honestly, having it limited is fine. It probably should still be limited at this point because just having access to a free tuner like that is a bit too good. But I do think that only certain decks can play this thing. We've got Foolish Burial here, just as a free send from deck. So a lot of decks would like that. Zombies, Lightsworn, etc. Any deck that can benefit from a mill would like this card. Future Fusion here is a really, really powerful card. It's just milling a bunch of cards from your deck because it does not have this errata effect. We play with the old versions of the card deck, so this thing just sends a bunch of fusion materials from deck to grave immediately, which is pretty good if you can send like everything to your graveyard with something like Chimeritic Overdragon. So that is why this thing is still here. We've got a Giant Trunade here as well, kind of like Heavy Storm, just a great way to deal with back row and push for game. This thing is not banned though because it doesn't actually destroy the back row like Heavy Storm does. It just bounces it back for a turn. So it's more like Cold Wave in that regard. We've got Inferni Launcher, which is a new hit here because Infernis are pretty good in this format. And having more than 1 launcher can extend their combos to kind of an absurd point. So having just 1 is probably where this thing should be. We got Level Limit Area B here, just to limit the power of certain stall decks. We got Limited Removal to limit the power of certain OTKs with like machines. We got Mega Warp here for the same reason as Limited Removal. We got Minecon here because this thing is very good at going to synchro plays. It's not as limited as something like Brain Control, with the exception of like being able to take set monsters. But it is still very good at going into synchro plays very easily. Monster Gate is here to limit the power of certain Reading Gate decks that are probably not that powerful in this format, but it's here anyways. Monster Reborn is insane. I don't know why they brought this thing back. This thing is incredibly powerful. You're just able to bring back a monster from your graveyard or your opponent's graveyard. Any monster, basically. This thing is just crazy. I mean, yeah, I will say, I think this is probably a worse deck you want of than BrainCon, just because you don't need to rely on what's on field. You can also just take from the grave. So this thing is crazy. I don't know why they brought it back, but it is back, so every deck should really play it. 1-for-1 is a great way to just get out certain level 1 monsters that you want, like you can go for a Mind Master or just some other tuner and make some big plays there. Of course, Substode now banned, so Frogs can't use it, but there are some other decks that want to go into certain level 1 monsters. We've got Overload Fusion here, as I mentioned, for the Future Fusion. Chimeritic Overdragon plus Future Fusion plus Overload Fusion is game most of the time, so that's why this thing is here. We got Reasoning, just like Monster Gate, limit the power of Reading Gate decks that honestly do not need to have their power limited at this point, but they still are. Rhoda is here, also at 1. Just to limit the power and consistency, I guess, of certain warrior decks. We got Scapegoat here, also at 1. Just because you can do synchro summons with the tokens, I guess. And also it is a good stall tool, I guess, as well. So this thing probably can still be here. We got Swords of Revealing Light. Another stall card that is hit, although this thing could probably come off. I don't really think it's that good in this format. Call of the Haunted is here as well to be able to bring back Monster from Grave. It takes a little bit more setup than Monster Reborn, also is more restricted than Monster Reborn, so that's why I'm okay with this and not Monster Reborn. Ceasefire is here, deal a bit of burn, anti-flip strats, I guess, as well. So pretty good card to have in your side deck if you're worried about flip strategies, I guess, although I don't know what flip strategy would be in this format. But it's mainly used in burn decks, so those are the ones I would play with this. We got Gravity Bind here. Again, another limit to the stall decks. Magical Explosion is here. Just sort of a gimmicky FTK style deck. But it is here if you want to play that. Although with only one explosion, I'm not sure how well you can. Minecraft is here because, when there are a lot of searches around or in conjunction with like Trap Dust Shoot, this thing is pretty good. It's pretty good in general. But it also just rips things from hand, which the game doesn't necessarily like people doing. We got Mirror Force here, very fair card that punishes over-aggression and attacking, so I'm okay with this being here. Return from Different Dimension is good for certain banish spam decks, which there are a couple of those in this format. We got Royal Oppression here, now at 1, this thing was at 2. I think that's a good change. Just get this thing out of the format. It's not really that fun, just very oppressive, pun intended, I guess. We got Solemn Judgment here as well. A good limit. This thing is very, very powerful in the right hands. So having more than one of this might get out of hand pretty quickly. We got Transmigration Prophecy, just curbing the power of Graveyard Disruption, I guess. We got TT here blowing up the board. Kind of like Mirror Force, it's a way to punish overextension, so I do like this thing being in the format. But just at 1 is probably good enough. Trap Dust Shoot here. This thing is one of the most toxic cards in the game's history, and it's just really good at just sending a monster back into the deck and depriving your opponent of a card in hand. Very, very good card. Very, very toxic card. But it's still around for some reason. And then Wall of Revealing Light is another stall card that is here. We've also got the 5 pieces of Exodia for flavor reasons mainly. And then for the synchros, we got Bryonac, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, limited to 1 copy, and Goyo Guardian, limited to 1 copy. 2 level 6s that are very, very powerful in their own way. Them being limited, I think, is not really that big of a deal because you can just go into them into the extra deck, but now you can't go into a second one. So I do think that that is good at least. But that'll do it for the limits. Let's dive into the semi-limits before finishing off the lists here. Now, the semi-limit list is not necessarily the most important part about this list because, oftentimes you might not want to play these cards at 3 anyways, but it is important to discuss because certain decks will be affected by it. So let's dive into it. Chaos Stork is now at 2. It was previously at 1, so this thing is marching onward to unlimited territory, which is pretty good, I think, because I don't think this thing is that busted. It is very powerful as a sort of pseudo-boss, but it's not the craziest thing in the world, especially in this format. We've got Dandelion at 2, a great way to just get, tokens on your side of the field. Plant decks will like this. We've got Mally at 2. If this thing was at 1, it would do nothing. If it was at 3, it would be a little bit too powerful getting out fodder on field. So this thing is, belongs perfectly at 2, honestly, in this format. Speaking of Honesty, now we got Honest as well, also at 2 copies. Great hand trap for light decks like Lightsworn, and something that you need to keep an eye out for if you're playing decks like that. Judgment Dragon, speaking of Lightsworn, is very good for that deck. It's the boss monster of that deck and is very, very strong. Having 3 would enable you to get 9k damage on board, very easily. So that's why this thing is at 2. Lone Fire Blossom, really good for plant decks. Honestly, I think the thing could be at 3, but this does limit the consistency of plant decks. So I think it probably does belong here, even though it could be at 3. We got Snipe Hunter here, also marching towards unlimited status. This thing was limited, now it's semi'd. This thing is kind of like the worst best card in the game, because if you never roll a 1 or a 6, it just pops your opponent's entire board. If you only roll a 1 or a 6, it does nothing except get rid of your entire hand. So the thing is not my favorite card in the world, but certain decks will play it. We've got Demise here at 2. Just like for Advanced Ritual Art, this thing's kind of here because of past sins. I don't really think it's that good. You won't really encounter decks playing this, but it is something to keep in mind. We got Chain Strike here for burn decks. I don't think burn is that good in this format, but it's something that you can play around with if you want to. Gold Sark is also a 2, very powerful card in certain decks, either setting up your banish pile for banish plays or just getting a card to come to your hand in a couple turns when you need it. This thing is pretty good all around. We have Magical Stone Excavation, being able to get back certain spells, mainly used in certain gimmicky decks like Magical Explosion, FTK. But there are some other decks that can maybe use this. MST is now at 2. This thing was at 1 for quite some time, but since they banned heavy, I think it makes sense to bring this thing back to 2. We've got a bottomless trap hole here at 2. This thing's been at 2 for a bit, and it makes sense. It's a pretty good trap, but not the best trap in the world. We've got a magic cylinder here at 2. This thing was at 1, but they're bringing it back because honestly, this thing is not really good enough to be on the list. We got our Geometry also at 2. This thing was also at 1. Seems like they're getting a little bit more lax on certain burn decks. But, you know, honestly, these things could probably be off the list without any negative consequences. Because these things are not really that good in this era. We got Skill Drain also at 2 here. This thing is very powerful floodgate, so good to have this thing on the list in some capacity. And then Ultimate Offering, which I think is mainly here for gadget decks, which could use it to, you know, a pretty good degree. But there are also some other decks that could use this as further extension, so it's probably good just to limit the power of it. Also, we've got Duloran, Tiger King of the Ice Barrier, which is a new card on the list here. This is a relatively new card for this format in general, but it's not really the best thing in the world. There are some loops you can do with it, which is why it's here. But frankly, there are better things that you could be doing than those loops. And in a format like this, like a gimmicky sort of combo like that, is not really going to cut it. Now, before I move on, I want to talk about the cards that were on the list but have now been freed. So we've got Cyber Dragon to start with here. Cyber Dragon was semied, as were most of these cards, but Cyber Dragon has been signed for a little bit of time. And I think this thing being off is pretty good for decks that want to go second or get aggressive with it, or certain machine decks as well. Or as just a counter to machine decks as well. Having 3 of this is very nice too. But yeah, I think this thing is an iconic card of the GX era. Nice to see it finally off the list in the 5Ds era. Goblin Zombie is also off the list. Zombies are not the best at this point, so you can probably take off this card, especially because like things like Mizuki or Plague are the more powerful cards in the deck. Treeborn Frog also now off. You know, Frog's lost Substode, which is pretty brutal for the deck, so having 3 of this is probably needed, even though I'm not sure those decks would even play 3. As you could just clog up on frogs too easily. Black Rose Dragon is now unlimited from 1, which is kind of an interesting choice. But I guess since they've got Darkhold back, they're like, okay, you know, having more board wipes is probably fine. United We Stand here is also unlimited. This thing was at 2. Honestly, this thing should have been on the list a long time ago because its time has passed. Royal Decree also off the list now, a trap floodgate here. I'm not too sorry to see it off because it shuts down other floodgate decks, so that's kind of nice to have. But that's going to do it for the lists themselves. We do still have some new cards to go through, so let's dive into those, starting with some new type support. Now, I don't normally start with talking about the new type support. I normally talk about the new archetypes or the best cards in the set or things like that. But I actually wanted to talk about the new type support here because it allows me to talk about some of the more interesting parts of Duelist Revolution, which was the set that came out in between Frog Format and this one. And it is a set that I have a lot of fond memories of. It's also a set that was kind of weird in a lot of different ways. Like, it went kind of hard on certain type themings. And those are interesting to talk about, so let's dive into them. Now, the most important type theming is beast types, which we will get to in a second. But the cover card of the set was Dragon Knight Draco Equiste, which is an attempt to draw together dragons and warriors, kind of like Yusei Fudo's deck did in the anime, and this was an anime card. So, as such, it's not really that good. It's a fusion monster made with 1 Dragon Synchro monster and 1 warrior monster, 3200 attack, 2000 defense. That must be fusion summoned. Once per turn, you can target 1 Dragon Synchro monster in the graveyard, banish that target, and if you do until the end phase, this card's name become that monster's and replace this effect with that monster's original effects. While this card is in attack position, your opponent takes any effect damage you would have taken from their card effects instead. So this thing is not really better than a Dragon Synchro monster that it would replace. Like, if you want to have the effect of a Dragon Synchro monster, just use that Dragon Synchro monster instead of wasting a fusion card and also a warrior monster in addition to it to bring out this guy. 3200 attack is not really that good compared to some of the Dragon fusion monsters that you'd have, like Stardust Dragon or Red Dragon Archfiend or something like that. They're all relatively within a similar range, and generally, at this point in the game, attack stat is not what matters as much as being able to dodge removal like Stardust Dragon would. Or having a useful effect like Red Dragon Archfiend might. So this thing, not really that good, but it's a funny card you can play if you want to, I guess. It's clearly meant to be made with Miracle Synchro Fusion, which is a normal spell that says fusion summon one fusion monster from your extra deck that lists a synchro material or synchro monster as material by banishing fusion monsters list or fusion materials, listed on it from your field or graveyard. If this set card is destroyed by your opponent's card effect and sent to the graveyard, draw one card. So that last part is honestly the best part of it, because if you actually want to make Dragon Knight Draco Keats with it, you actually have to get rid of the Dragon Synchro monster you're using to make it. And so you won't be able to use this card's effect to gain the effect of that Dragon Synchro monster. So it's just very strange that they would do this. But I mean, it's here, I guess. You can play with it if you want to. There is another fusion monster that this thing can make. But before we dive into that, since Draco Quest is made with a warrior monster, let's talk about the warrior support, which there was a little bit of in this set, although it's not the main focus, that we'll get to in a second. Desperate Drag is a continuous trap. It says if a face-up attack position monster you control is destroyed by battle during damage calc, you can reduce the battle damage from this battle to 0 and special summon one level 4 lower warrior type monster from your hand at the end of the damage step. So this is a way to just bring out monsters from hand, which is kind of neat. Maybe there are some warrior decks out there that would want to use this. I'm not really sure which ones would, but it's here if you want it, I guess. Pestilence is also kind of an anti-warrior tech. It's an equip spell that says equip only to a warrior type, beast warrior type, or spellcaster type monster. Its attack becomes 0 during each of your standby phases. It inflict 500 damage to the controller of the equipped monster. So you really only give this to a monster your opponent controls. But I mean, if you're teching against your opponent and they've got like warrior, beast warrior, or spellcasters, just play like Last Day of the Witch or something if you want to get rid of their spellcasters, or play some other better anti-type support than this. This thing is frankly just really, really bad. But diving into the other fusion monster that I mentioned with Miracle Synchro Fusion, we've got Ultimate Axon Kicker, which is an attempt to, give a kick in the pants to psychic monsters, I guess. But I'm not really sure it really does that. It is better than Draco Keast, even though it only has 2900 attack instead of 3200 attack. But maybe one psychic type synchro monster and one psychic type monster. So a bit more reasonable fusion materials if you're playing a psychic deck already. And this card, or this monster, can only be special summoned by fusion summon from the extra deck. This card cannot be destroyed by card effect, which is already an improvement upon Draco Keast, because that makes it kind of annoying for your opponent out. And then during battle between this attacking card and defensive monster, use defense lower than the attack of this card, inflict piercing battle damage. And then when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sent it to the graveyard, you gain life points equal to the destroyed monster's attack. So in a way, it's kind of like Hyper Psychic Blaster, which is another psychic monster that you go into as a boss monster that, likes to attack and defense position monsters. But honestly, you just go into that instead of playing the package that you need to make this. Even though not being able to destroy by card effects is very nice, you've used up like 3 cards to go into this, and one of those cards, the Synchro monster, used up at least 2 more to go into that. So you're putting a lot of resources into this one card that is probably not the best overall. But I guess like if you do have Miracle Synchro Fusion, you just keep this thing set until you can go into it. If your opponent pops it, then you draw a card so it replaces itself. So it's not that, risky of a package to include because it's not that big of a package. So I guess you can do that if you want, but psychic decks that are just pure psychic decks are not really that good. So I'm not really sure how that would work out for you. Although those decks did get a little bit more support. They got Final Psychic Ogre, which is a level 5 psychic that says if it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can pay it in life points. Select one psychic type monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand, which is actually a kind of neat recursion effect there. And they also got Psychic Nightmare, which is a TCG exclusive apparently, and it is absolutely terrible. This thing is garbage. Worst psychic synchro monster that I've seen so far. Level 6 wind psychic synchro, 24 attack, 1800 defense, made with 1 tuner, 1 or more non-2 psychic monsters. Because if they didn't lock you into psychics, this thing would be everywhere. Way too powerful. It says once per turn during your main phase, you can pick 1 random card in your opponent's hand and call what type of card it is, monster, spell, or trap. If you call it right, this card gains 1000 attack into your opponent's end phase. Now, it's not terrible, right? Like, that's better than some other effects, I guess. But like, frankly, if you're going into a synchro monster, you want it to do more than just buff itself up, potentially. So, yeah, this thing is not really that good. I guess it can get you a little bit of hand knowledge, but I don't really think it's worth playing. Now, before we dive into the main type that, this set liked, we also got Stygian Street Patrol here, which is actually an important card in Inferni decks, which, are deck that people can play. At level 4, Fiend, 1600 attack, 1200 defense, says if this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and send it to the graveyard, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the original level of that monster in the graveyard times 100. That's not the important effect, though. The important part is you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon one fiend monster with 2,000 or less attack from your hand. So the main combo is you use this and go into like Inferno Archfiend to then get a search. And also, it means that you don't need to use your normal summon on that. So you can summon out like a Necromancer or something like that afterwards as well. So this thing very good for Inferno decks. Probably won't see much play outside of that. But, it does its job, right? It supports a Fiend deck, which is, what it's meant to do. But, that's the more standard sort of type support that we get. We also got a bunch of support for Beasts in this set that is kind of aiming to turn the deck into sort of like a weird synchro ladder deck, but also one that like plays around with banishing its monsters, but also like it just is trying to do like too much. And it's not really cohesive enough to make an interesting strategy. But that is, one of the most interesting type of design decisions, in my opinion, to examine in a set like this. So let's dive into that. Firstly, I will mention that, at the same time that this set was coming out, there were some cards released, I believe in some like tournament packs, but it might have just been in promo sets in general, of just like normal monsters that came out around this time, that were like older cards in OCG, but finally came over to the TCG. Main one being Alligator's Sword, the classic Joey monster. This mighty lizard man can swing his sword so fast that it's more than the speed of sound. Classic flavor text there. But this thing also came with a fusion monster, Alligator's Sword Dragon, which is an anime card, which is made with Baby Dragon and Alligator Sword, so more Joey cards. And this card can attack your opponents directly if the only face-up monster they control are Earth, Water, or Fire. Will the thing ever get used in this format? I doubt it. I guess you can make it with Instant Fusion, but this thing is really, really bad, as are all these normal monsters, despite them being iconic. I mean, who could forget Great Bill, or Obese Marmot of Nefariousness, or even Wilmy, classic Wilmy. But those cards are not really important for the Beast deck. I just figured that they'd be interesting to mention here. They did come out like, around the same time, which is kind of neat. So maybe that was intentional. Maybe that's why they went the Beast design direction they did. I don't think so, because this was OCG planning here, and these cards, were already out in the OCG. But yeah, let's dive into the Beast monsters now, because I do think they are quite interesting. Monoceros, I think, is probably the best of them, which is kind of funny, but it is true. I think it's not really that good, but it's something at least. It's a level 3 beast with 1,000 attack, 1,000 defense that cannot be normal summoned or set. It can only be special summoned by removing from play one spell card from your hand, and then when you synchro summon using this card and a beast type tuner as the synchro materials, you can select one beast type tuner monster used for the synchro summon and special summon it from the graveyard. So the idea of this is you special summon this out, and maybe you have another tuner in the form of like Unihorned Familiar, which I'll get into in a second. And then you synchro off with those two into a Thunder Unicorn, which is the first step in your synchro ladder. And then you bring back a Unihorned Familiar and you go into the next step of your synchro ladder, the Voltic Bicorn. So that, I think, is like part of the intention of, the laddering, just doing that sort of thing. And Monoceros kind of makes that work. And Monoceros has a horn, just like Thunder Unicorn, just like Voltic Bicorn, just like the final leg in the ladder, Lightning Tricorn. But what do these unicorns do that makes them so worth laddering into? Well, I'm glad you're asking. The answer is not much. Thunder Unicorn is made with one beast type tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters, 2,200 attack, 1,800 defense, level 5 monster. So once per turn during your main phase, you can select one face-up monster your opponent controls. It loses 500 attack for each monster you control until the end phase. And then during the turn this effect is activated, no other monsters can attack except this card. So what you might have noticed is that this thing is really bad to ladder with, because its effect makes it so that you can't attack with any monster beside it. So if it's gone, like if you wanted to use this effect and then go into a 7, you can't attack with that monster. So it's like, what's the point of that? Like, it's so weird, because these are clearly meant to ladder. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it seems like they're very clearly made to ladder, with Monoceros being able to just facilitate that laddering so easily, with these things all being themed around the unicorns. And with Lightning Tricorn even saying that, when it's destroyed by your opponent's card, you can select one Thunder Unicorn or Voltic Bicorn in your graveyard and special summon it. So you're meant to have that thing. It's just mind-boggling. But that's the effect of Lightning Tricorn. That's the only effect of Lightning Tricorn. It's a level 8, 2,800 attack beast, I guess. It's made with one tuner and one or more non-tuner beast-type monsters. So, I don't know. It's just very strange if they don't actually want you laddering with these to have the Lightning Tricorn effect be that. Now, Voltic Bicorn, to its credit, just does not fit into the ladder at all, really. It's a level 7 beast type tuner made with one or more non-tuner monsters. They're not really a super easy way to ladder into it, unless you, yeah, I really can't see it. Like, if you went Monoceros in a level 4 into this thing, like, you know, you bring back level 4 and you can't go into the Lightning Tricorn until you get to level 1, of which none of these are. The level 1 beast tuner is Key Mouse, which was released in a previous set, which I'll get into later because they released a thing that pairs with this, but not in a way that actually lets you ladder into. I mean, it's just okay. I'll get into that when I get into it, but let's focus on Voltic Bicorn now. So Voltic Bicorn is a Beast Synchro, level 7, 2500 attack, 2000 defense, made with one Beast type tuner, one or more non-tuner monsters. And then if this card is destroyed by your opponent's card, either by battle or by card effect, both players send the top 7 cards of their deck to the graveyard. Not only do the Beast deck not even really want to do that unless it's a very specific Beast deck, which I'll get into when I cover the archetypes, it doesn't even fit into the ladder because the ladder is meant to have this thing on the field and then go into the Tricorn. But if this thing is destroyed, it's not on the field, so you can't, like what's the point? Like, I'm just so confused. Like, why do that? You know, it's like, at no point in this ladder are you meant to actually ladder into the next thing, despite Monoceros enabling you to ladder, despite these things all being themed together. Like, it's just so confusing. I understand that these are anime cards. They're going to have anime effects that are specific to the, like, anime duel that they're in. But it's just so bizarre that, like, this could have been an interesting thing. Because I think up to this point, there weren't really any, like, super laddery decks, right? Like, there were decks that would want to go into multiple synchros. But, like, laddering into, you know, one synchro and then another was not really what most decks did. Like, Value Turbo, I think, has the biggest claim to that, where you can, like, use your synchro monsters to then make more synchro monsters with another value. But other decks don't really do that. So this would have been a new sort of ground to tread. And the way they tread is just so bad. So, I mean, I don't know. If that was not the intention, then I apologize for assuming it that way and criticizing for it. But, I mean, from the outside looking in, like, it really seems like they wanted this way. And the fact that you can't really do much with it is kind of disappointing. But that's not the only thing about the Beast push in this set that's disappointing, because there's also another whole dimension to this that is also kind of not really together there, right? And to explain that, let's start with Unicorn Familiar, which I mentioned with Monoceros. But this thing does have an effect that ties into the other side of Beasts here. It's a Beast tuner, 0 attack, 1000 defense. And it says when this face-up defense position card is selected as an attack target, you remove from play one monster you control other than this card to remove this card from play. The attacking monster must attack. During your next standby phase, if this card is removed from play by this effect, this card returns to the field. So that is a way to just get a material back on field for the next turn, which a lot of the beasts in the set do, where somehow they are coming back on your next turn to make some synchro plays, presumably. But this thing also does that by banishing a card, which is a theme in the set with the beasts, where, you know, you banish beasts to do something, and then there are cards that, you know, play well with beasts being banished, and then you take advantage of those to, like, do other things, like, but those don't really come together as a cohesive whole either. The other big, you know, way to banish your beast is Beast Rising. It is a continuous trap. This is one per turn. You remove from play one face-up beast type or beast warrior type monster. You control select one other face-up beast type or beast warrior type monster you control. The selected monster gains the original attack of the monster removed from play for this effect. So this is a way to boost your beasts by banishing other beasts, which is kind of nice. And Beast Rage does a similar thing, which this is a normal spell. It says all monsters you control gain 200 attack for each removed from play beast type and winged beast monsters. So these two things together can, like, boost your beast to a pretty high degree. And, you know, they can even be played in a deck that's playing Beast Warriors or Wing Beasts, even though the kind of focus here is on beasts specifically. So they're just kind of adding those other two because it's part of, like, the classic tri-type for those. But really is meant to play with beasts. And, I mean, attack boost is nice, I guess. But, like, in this format, you gotta boost up a lot of attack if you actually want it to be worth it, and neither of these really do that in my opinion. Now, there are also some beasts that benefit from being banished, like Dark Death or Tapir. They're level 2 Earth Beast, 1100 attack, 300 defense. It says when this card is removed from play, you select one level 4 or lower beast type monster in your graveyard and special summon it. So this is a way to further extend. However, if you want to use this for, like, the Unicorn Familiar's effect, that's actually pretty bad, because then your opponent just attacks it and whatever you bring out. So it's not ideal there. But it is something that you can do, and if you want to do it for someone like Beast Rising instead, then, you know, it might be a little bit more good for you, I guess, in terms of the timing of that. But yeah, this thing is your main payoff to the banishes here, right? Or I don't even know if you'd call it a payoff, but like this is the thing that wants to be banished. You'd think that more of these beasts want to be banished, but this is frankly kind of the only one. But it does something when it gets banished. So like you do that, you get back something, I guess, from your graveyard, and that is good enough. You've also got Elephant here, which is a level 2 beast tuner. 500 attack, 300 defense. So when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can select one of your level 3 or lower beast type, beast warrior type, or one beast type monster that is removed from play and add it to your hand. So I guess, you know, if you banish the Dark Desert Tapir to bring something back, you can then Elephant that back to then use this again, or Elephant back, you know, whatever else you banished. So this thing is a way to recover what you banished, I guess. And it's a tuner, so you could ladder with this Monoceros, I guess. Although you don't get the benefit from me being destroyed, synchro off with it. So, I don't know. It's just confusing. I mean, again, they're giving you tools to access different parts of the banish thing. So, like, the Dark Desert Tapir lets you access your graveyard after banishing this. And Elephant lets you access your banish after this being destroyed. So, like, they're giving you tools to do different things, but the tools don't necessarily fit together into a coherent toolbox, if that makes sense. You've also got Unicorn Beacon, which is a normal spell that select one of your removed from play level 5 or lower beast type or winged beast type monsters. Remove from play one card from your hand, special summon the selected monster in attack position. This could actually be interesting in Vayu decks. Not that I think Vayu is necessarily the best in this format. But you could do stuff where, like, you banish the Sirocco and a Vayu, and then you activate this to bring back the Sirocco. That's kind of funny. But in a beast deck, like, yes, you can use this as well to get back your banished beasts, which, again, you can banish beasts with, like, Beast Rising to boost things up, and then Unicorn Beacon back things, I guess, to bring it back. But it's kind of just a lot of extra steps to accomplish not much, right? But, like, you constantly have the tools to do those steps, I guess. It's just, what are those steps leading to? They're not building to anything. So that makes it kind of confusing. But moving away from the banished aspect of it, as I mentioned, we've got ways to, you know, access the graveyard through things like Dark Desert Tapir. But we've also got Lockcat here, which is a much easier way to access the graveyard. You summon this thing out, and when it's normal summon, you can select one level 1 beast type monster in your graveyard and spell summon in face up defense position. That would be Key Mouse, which was released previous to this set, which, you know, basically tailor-made to search out the Lockcat as well, so that's kind of funny. There will also be another monster coming out to complete this sort of trio, but right now this is what this does, and it doesn't even ladder into a synchro monster unless you want to go into Armory Arms specifically. But yeah, so that's kind of not the best, although I guess you could have the Monoceros out there. So I guess what you could do is you could go, so I guess there's another way to ladder, actually, because you go summon out Lockcat, bring back Key Mouse, summon out Monoceros by spell summoning it from hand, and then you go into your Voltic Bicorn, and then you can actually bring back the Key Mouse with the Monoceros, and then go into the Tricorn. So I guess that's an alternate way to ladder. So I guess that does make sense. So another way to ladder with Monoceros. So Monoceros is the main thing that you want to be doing if you want to ladder at all. But again, these things are kind of anti-synergistic with laddering for whatever reason. But we've also got other monsters that come around on the later turn. So we got Playful Possum here, level 2. Earth Beast, 800 attack, 600 defense. Says during your main phase, you can destroy this face-up card on the field. Your opponent must control a monster with higher attack than this card for you to activate and resolve this effect. During your standby phase, if this card is destroyed by this effect, you can summon this card from the graveyard. So that, if you could not tell, was really bad. This thing, it's not good. Because basically, if you want to use this thing, you got to summon it out. So either through something like the Dark Desert Tapir, or just summoning it out with your normal summon or something like that. Summon it out, destroy it. So you basically wasted your summon there. And then wait the turn for it to come back, which I guess is fine. But if you've got all these tools to bring out other beasts, like, why wait? Like, why do this? Just leave yourself vulnerable for a turn. Like, it's just, I'm sort of boggled by this card design here. And I get that it's, like, flavorful because a possum playing dead and then comes back, but, like, it's really bad. Egotistical Ape is much better. It's a level 5 Earth Beast tuner, 1200 attack, 1200 defense, and it can't be normal summon or set like Monoceros. This card can only be special summoned by sending one beast type monster from your hand to the graveyard. And when it's special summoned this way, you can activate one of these effects. Either increase the level of this card by the level of the beast monster, or decrease the level of this card by the level of the beast monster. So this is a very flexible tuner that you can bring out. And, you know, again, it's further extension like Monoceros is. But It's better than Playful Possum for sure. I'm just not really sure how good it really is. But in a beast deck, you'd probably play this just to be able to do your synchro plays more easily, I guess. Mind Mole here as well is a level 3 beast. This thing is actually, I think, one of the better of these beast cards. So the first time this card be destroyed by battle each turn, it is not destroyed. And then if this card is sent to the graveyard for the single summon of a beast monster, draw 1 card. And then if this face-up card you control leaves the field by your opponent's card effect, banish it. So there's another banish beast. So if this thing gets banished, you can bring it back with your Elephant or your Unicorn Beacon or something like that. This thing actually is very good because it draws you a card when it's synchroed off with. So this is a card that you probably want in the loop for synchro plays. We've also got Bicorn Rem, which is clearly meant to pair with Voltic Bicorn in terms of like a weird mill condition, where like you're trying to mill out your opponent to win. I don't really think that's that good, but it's there. It's a level 4 beast, 800 attack, 1600 defense. Says if this card is sent to the graveyard as a synchro material monster for a synchro summon, send the top 2 cards from your opponent's deck to the graveyard. So with this and Voltic Bicorn, that's 9 cards. If you bring back Voltic Bicorn with Lightning Tricorn, that's then 16 cards. So you're milling them out quite rapidly. But decks want their cards in graveyard at this time in the game. So it's not really that good. And you can't really do this rapidly enough to make that strategy worth pursuing. So it's just really bad. Also, we got Hypnocorn, which I guess is a fine beast on its own. It's just a level 4, 14 attack, 600 defense. Is when it's normal summoned. If your opponent controls a monster, you control no other monsters. You can target one set spell or trap card on the field to destroy that target. So it's spell and trap removal, I guess, at least in a form without heavy storm. So that's kind of nice. But yeah, the monsters here are all kind of underwhelming. The boss monsters and the monster that you build up into them with, even though there are some that I'm like, okay, that's kind of decent. They're generally not worth making a beast deck around. However, there are some good beast support cards. The big one being Horn of the Phantom Beast, the normal trap. It says target 1 beast or beast warrior to monster you control. Equip this card to that target, it gains 800 attack. And then if the equipped monster destroys your opponent's monster by balance, the graveyard, draw 1 card. That is extremely good. If you are playing a deck with beasts or beast warriors, this thing is absolutely killer. Because it can be used as a great battle trap. If your opponent attacks into it, you activate this in the damage step, destroy their monster by battle, and then draw a card on top of that. You just use to get consistent value in certain decks, like maybe stun decks as well. You just use this thing to equip to a beast and then run over your opponent's stuff, keep drawing cards. Very good in that capacity as well. And so, yeah, this thing is the reason to play a deck with like beast or beast warrior monsters in it, even though I wouldn't recommend building a deck around the beasts themselves. Although there are some more support cards as well. Call of the Wild is a continuous trap. So if your opponent if your monster destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, inflict 300 damage to your opponent for each beast monster you control. If you control 5, that's 1500 per attack over. So that's kind of nice, but you're likely not going to be controlling 5, especially with Dark Hole in the format. So not really that good. Super Rush Recklessly is a TCG exclusive. To start 1 beast monster you control and 1 monster your opponent controls. Destroy the first target, and if you do, shuffle the second target in your deck, or into the deck. That is, I guess, okay. Not really that good, because you're still spending 2 cards to get rid of 1, but it does shuffle it, so that's kind of neat. Also, the art on this doesn't really make sense, because the Rush Recklessly boar is hitting a Ryza, which would be the one to shuffle some things in, so it's like, is this like a taste of its own medicine, or I don't really know. But yeah, it's kind of confusing that way. And last we got Battle Instinct, a normal trap that says activate only when your opponent's monster, or when your opponent declares a direct attack and you control no monsters. Spell summon 1 level 4 or lower beast type monster from your hand in face-up attack position. So this is a way to just get bodies on board, I guess. So if you are at risk of taking a lot of damage, you can bring out like Mind Mole maybe, and maybe that protects you a little bit. I don't know. I think Battle Instinct is not really as good as a battle trap that would actually get rid of whatever you're trying to get rid of. But I guess it can bring out a monster that you could maybe extend with on a later turn. So more likely than not, your opponent's just going to run over the monster that you bring out. So not really that good. But that's going to do it for the type of sport I wanted to cover in this section. Yeah, and as I mentioned, a lot of this is just really bad. Like most of this stuff you won't be playing, but I do think that it's interesting to talk about in the sense of tying into the main sort of gist of the Duelist Revolution set. A lot of people remember Duelist Revolution as one of the better sets in the game's history, and there definitely were some really good cards in it. However, there are also some stinkers. Like this whole sort of theming of the set was kind of bad, with the exception of like Horn of the Phantom Beast. That's kind of like the one good card out of this beast slop, sort of section of the set. But there were some other beast monsters released in the set that were part of their own archetype. So let's cover that now. Those beast monsters I want to talk about are these scraps, which have a fair amount of beasts. They do have some other cards as well, but the main reason to play them in this format is because you can use them with Horn of the Panda Beast, and that is a fun sort of strategy to pursue. Now, the scraps on their own have their own interesting sort of identity beyond Horn of the Phantom Beast. They revolve around basically destroying themselves and getting off some interesting effects because of that. So let's start with the main deck monsters first. First, we got Scrap Chimera, which I want to talk about. It's a level 4 beast, 17 attack, 500 defense, and it can't be used as synchro material except for the synchro summon of a scrap monster, which we'll get into in a second. And all other monsters must be scrap monsters. But when it's normal summoned, you can target one scrap tuner in your graveyard, spell summon that target. So this is an instant level 8 if you use it with Scrap Beast, and a level 7 if you use it with Scrap Goblin here. But you're mainly using it with Scrap Beast to go into Scrap Dragon, which is the main synchro monster of this archetype. There's also Scrap Archfiend, which is level 7, just vanilla. But Scrap Dragon is much better. It's a level 8 dragon, synchro monster, 20 attack, 2,000 defense, made with one tuner and one more non-tuner. And once per turn, you can target one card you control and one card your opponent controls, destroy them. When this card in your possession is destroyed by your opponent's card and sent to the graveyard, target one non-synchro scrap monster in your graveyard and spell summon that target. So this thing is good enough to just be in most people's extra deck regardless, right? It's a generic level 8 that lets you, have great removal. And yeah, so it's very, very good in general. But for scrap specifically, the second part of it is also pretty good because you get to bring back a scrap monster when it's destroyed. So another reason to potentially play the deck. But let's dive a bit more into Scrap Beast here because I think Scrap Beast is also pretty decent. It's a level 4 Beast tuner, 1600 attack, 1300 defense. It says if this face-up defense monster or this card targeted for attack at the end of the battle phase, destroy this card. And then if this card is destroyed by the effect of a scrap card instead of the graveyard, you can target one scrap monster in your graveyard except Scrap Beast and add that target to your hand. So this is a good way to get recursion going if it is destroyed by a scrap monster or by a scrap card, which is important because there are some scrap cards that destroy. They're not monsters. And it can even trigger off its own effect, I guess, but realistically that part won't come up as much as the second part will. But it's mainly used just for, plays off Scrap Chimera. So that's the main reason to go into it. But it's important to talk about its effect as well. Scrap Goblin is a level 3 Beast Warrior tuner, 0 attack, 500 defense. It can't be destroyed by battle, but at the end of the battle phase, if this face-up card, defense position card specifically, is targeted for attack, destroy this card. And then if this card is destroyed by the effect of a scrap card inside the graveyard, including itself, you target one scrap monster in your graveyard except for Scrap Goblin, add that target to your hand. So this thing can also be used to get things back from the grave, just like Scrap Beast can. So they've got basically the same second effect there. But that effect can be very good at just recursion, which this deck is kind of good at, right? Scrap Dragon brings back a scrap monster. You can, if you run out of Scrap Dragons, although you can play 3 of it, so I'm not sure how you would. If you run out of those, you can also recur those with these things. So yeah, it's pretty good in general. Now, if you're talking about other things to destroy the scrap monsters here, we got Scrap Hunter, level 3 machine. 1600 attack, 400 defense. Says once per turn, you select one face-up scrap monster you control, except this card. Destroy it and send one tuner monster from your deck to the graveyard. So, if you destroy like a Scrap Goblin or Scrap Beast and use the effect of the Scrap Hunter to send a Scrap Beast or a Scrap Goblin, like whichever other one it is, you can use that to add the tuner back that you just sent. So, which is an instant other tuner in your hand. Although if you're subbing this thing out and you've got a Scrap Beast or a Scrap Goblin, I'm not sure why you wouldn't just go into synchro play, but it is something you can do if you want to. You can also just get a Scrap Chimera out if that's already in your graveyard by just setting these, I guess. So this thing can be somewhat useful. But frankly, as I mentioned, like, why would you do that when you could just go into synchro play right away? So it's not really that good, and I think scrap decks generally don't play this thing. Scrap Storm is a card that scrap decks definitely do play. There's a quick play spell that says target one scrap monster you control, send one scrap monster from your deck to the graveyard, then draw one card, then destroy that monster. So this is kind of like the Gemini Spark of the deck, except it doesn't really do as much as Gemini Spark does. But it does let you basically, search out a scrap monster from your deck if you are doing it on something like a Scrap Beast, right? Because you can go Scrap Storm when your opponent tries to use removal on the Scrap Beast, and you get to send a scrap monster from your deck to your graveyard, just like Hunter would. You send like Scrap Chimera, and then you pop the Scrap Beast, and you also get to draw a card. And so you get back the Scrap Chimera, and it's just a very, very good combo all around there. So Scrap Storm, definitely worth playing with the Scrap Beast and Scrap Chimera. Scrap Yard can also be used to search out the Scrap Beast or the Scrap Goblin if you want to go that way. But honestly, you kind of only need the Scrap Beast and the Scrap Chimera. So if you're playing a Scrap deck, honestly, like the Chimeras and the Beasts are your main thing that you're going to be playing in the main, and then backing up with Scrap Storm, Scrap Yard, etc. There is also Scrap Sheen, which is a spell that says select one face-up Scrap monster you control and destroy it. Then all face-up Scrap monster you control gain 1,000 attack until the end phase. So this can also be used as a sort of Scrap Storm substitute as well, but definitely not as good as Scrap Storm. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, like changing the attack and defense stats is not really that good on its own. You kind of want to pair it with other things, and Scrap Sheen doesn't really do that as much. We've also got Scrap Rage, which is a normal trap that says activate only during damage calculation. If a defense position Scrap monster on the field is being attacked, it gains 2,000 defense and is destroyed at the end of the battle phase. That's a really bad card. Just a really bad card. Because the Scrap monster defense, like Scrap Beast and Scrap Goblin, would already be destroyed at the end of the battle phase. So it's like, I don't really get why you're doing that. So yeah, this thing is just awful. Should not be played in any Scrap deck. We have Scrap Golem here, the last of the Scrap main deck monsters, level 5 Earth Rock, 2,300 attack, 1,400 defense. It says one per turn, you can target one level 4 lower Scrap monster in your graveyard, spell summon that target to either player's field. So you can go into a Scrap Dragon pretty easily by bringing back the Scrap Goblin and making 8 off that, but getting this thing out on the field can be kind of annoying, I guess, if you don't have a monster to tribute it into. So, yeah, I don't necessarily think it's the best, but it is a card that you can play if you want to. We also got Guts of Steel. Speaking of Graveyard Revival, the normal spell that says select 3 Scrap monsters in your graveyard. Your opponent picks one of them. You spell summon it to either player's side of the field and remove the rest from play. So this thing is also not really that good because the Scraps kind of want to just be recurring each other constantly. So if you get rid of resources to do that, then it's not really the best. But it is a thing you can play if you want more just revival. Like if you mainly care about, I just need the special summon now, you can do this. But your opponent will get to pick which one you bring back. So unless you're picking 3 Scrap monsters that are all the same, your opponent will just pick the one that's worse for you to bring back. So it's not really the best in that capacity either. But moving on to our next archetype here, we've got the Amazonesses. So these are building off of previous Amazoness monsters that came out in the DM era. That's how old this archetype is. But this is the first wave of monsters here that really gives the deck an identity beyond just being, the monster that like Mai played in the anime. So first we got Amazon's Queen, a boss monster for the deck with level 6 Earth Warrior. That is a big difference. However, attack 18 defense says Amazoness monster you control cannot be destroyed by battle, which is important as a lot of the Amazoness monsters do depend on battle for doing their thing. Amazoness Trainee is a level 4 warrior, 15 attack, 13 defense. Says monster destroyed by battle with this card are placed on the bottom of the deck instead of going to the graveyard. And then if this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, it gains 200 attack. So they a really good card because it deprives your opponent of a graveyard, which is very nice, and also just keeps getting bigger, which is also kind of nice. So I will say, while being a battle-centric deck is not necessarily the best in this format, unless you're doing something like Glad Beast, which are getting value constantly off their battling, I think that this is not a bad direction to go if you're a battler. Amazon Sage is another battle-focused monster, level 4 warrior, 14 attack, 700 defense. Says at the end of the damage step, if this card attacked and is still on the field, trigger 1 spell trap your opponent controls, destroy that target. So if you've got Queen out and you're worried about a back row that you don't want to attack the Queen into, you can attack him with Sage, even if it would normally be destroyed by battle, and just pop that spell trap before going for the Queen or the Trainee even. Of course, there are other ways to keep this thing alive. We've got Amazon's Heirloom, an equip spell. So equip only to an Amazoness monster. The first time the equip monster would be destroyed by battle each turn is not destroyed. And then after damage calculation, the equip monster attacked a monster, destroy the attacked monster. So that gives Sage another way to just get in and, both pop the monster and pop the spell trap. So that's pretty decent in that regard. We also get Amazon's Fighting Spirit, a continuous spell that says if your Amazoness monster attacks a monster with higher attack, the attacking monster gains 1,000 attack during damage calculation only. So this is basically a way for your Amazoness monsters to win all their battles, hopefully. But, as I mentioned earlier, just having a thing to win battles on its own is not really good enough in a format like this, which is kind of wild because through most of Yu-Gi-Oh's history it was. But the power creep has gotten to the point where, you're not really getting the most value off that. As much as something like, for instance, Gladbeast's another battle-focused deck. They do something at the end of every battle phase. Like they either, recur a card, or they pop a card, or they do this or that. Whereas this is just, basically getting over a card, which is good, don't get me wrong, but it's not doing as much as other decks are doing with their battle phases, or just doing things outside of battle phases too. So yeah, I think that's the biggest flaw with Amazons at this point in time, is that battle will only get you so far if that is your main goal. You need to be doing other stuff as well, and unfortunately, most of these cards are not doing that. But we do have a field spell for the deck at least, which is kind of cool. Amazon's Village, a field spell that says all Amazon's monsters gain 200 attack. Once per turn, one Amazon's monster is destroyed with battle or card effect and sent to the graveyard. You plus summon one Amazon's monster from your deck with a level less than or equal to that Amazon's monster in the grave. So, of the monsters that I've shown you here, they're not really going to be bringing out too many of them. But there are some others. Amazon Scouts, level 2 Amazon's monster, 500 attack, 1100 defense. It's actually has an interesting quick effect. So you contribute this card, and then this turn, neither player can target Amazon's monster you can currently control with monster effects. Also, they cannot be destroyed by card effects. So this can be used to chain to a card trying to destroy your Amazon's monsters, I guess. So that's kind of neat. And if you got Amazon's Queen out, they can't be destroyed by battle. So it sort of deprives another way to destroy your stuff. So that's also kind of cool. But it being kind of the main thing that you're bringing out off Village is kind of annoying, I will say. It's not the only way to bring these things out. You can also bring them out off Queen Spawn, a normal trap that says when an Amazon's monster controls sponsored by battle sent to the graveyard, plus summon one level 4 lower Amazon's monster from your deck, so you can bring those out off that. Although you'd probably want to bring out one of your level 4s, because those do a little bit more for you. But it is still something that you can do there. And if you have just a bunch of Amazon's monsters out in the field, you can also use Amazon's Shamanism to bring back some other ones. Normal trap that says destroy all Amazon's monsters you control. Then you can special summon level 4 lower Amazon's monster from your graveyard and face up defense position up to the number of monsters destroyed by this effect. So they very clearly did not want this deck to be able to OTK, which you might be able to do if you had a bunch of Amazonists out, and then Amazon Shamanism to then destroy them, bring some back. But I mean, I don't know. Why not just give the deck an OTK? Let it try to do something. As is, I don't really think this thing is worth playing. But it would have been cool to see if they'd actually, not chickened out and gone full on, just bring these things back and attack in more. We've also got Amazon's Willpower. Speaking of bringing things back from the grave, they continuous trap that says activate this card by targeting one Amazon's monster in your graveyard. It's supposed to summon it in attack position, but it cannot change its battle position. It must attack if able. When this card leaves the field, destroy that monster. When that monster is destroyed, destroy this card. So this is basically a Call of the Haunted, but specifically for Amazon's monsters, and also putting on that Amazon's monster a bit of bloodlust, so it must always attack, which is actually a lot better than Shamanism, I will say. But, I don't know. It's not necessarily the best thing in the world. Not the worst thing in the world either, but it's definitely better than a lot of the other sport. But it is kind of awkward because, you just have to constantly attack, and your opponent can play around that if they're able to, which they most likely will be with what a lot of the other decks are doing here. But, Revival's Revival, I guess, and it is better than the Shamanism. So I do think if you want to build an Amazon's deck, which maybe I'll do for the channel, maybe that'd be fun to sort of see. I'm planning on doing a fair amount of videos in X-Saber Format, which will hopefully come out a bit more briskly than my, recent pace. But maybe I'll do an Amazon's video if I've got time. And this will probably be in the deck along with Trainee and Queen. Moving on, we've also got Naturia, another archetype that gets some support in this set. Naturia is kind of an archetype that's best just because of its synchro monsters. The rest of the deck is not really that good, but Bamboo Shoot finally gives us a main deck monster that's actually decent. It's a level 5 Earth Plant, 2000 attack, 2000 defense. It says while you control this face-up card that was tribute summoned by tributing in Naturia monsters, you can't just bring this out off Lone Fire Blossom. Your opponent cannot activate spell or trap cards, which is a pretty good floodgate there. As spell and trap cards are very good. So if you control this thing and it's been tribute summoned properly, then your opponent will have a bit of a tough time. So, that's kind of an interesting thing you can do with Naturia now. Unfortunately, kind of the only really good support card they got. They also got a field spell in Naturia Forest. Quick field spell that says if you negate the activation of a card your opponent controls, you can add one level 3 or lower Naturia monster from your deck to your hand. So if you got like Naturia Beast out or something like that, you can negate things and then search out Naturias with that. So that's kind of cool. but all the monsters that you search are really bad. So, that's kind of a downside to it. I will say Pineapple is probably the best of those to search. It's basically a Treeborn Frog, but specifically for Enturias. Is a plant, 100 attack, 100 defense. All face-up monsters you control become plant monsters, one per turn during your standby phase. If you do not control a face-up Naturia Pineapple and have no monster in your graveyard except plant or beast, you will summon this card from your graveyard. You must control no spells or traps to activate and resolve this effect. So you don't necessarily want to search that out off Forest either, because it's a spell you're going to have out probably. So, but I will say this thing is just decent in general, and, paired with Bamboo Shoot, that's pretty good. So if you want to have a small Pineapple and Bamboo Shoot package in a plant deck in general, maybe not the worst thing to have. We also got Naturia Beans here, level 2 plant, 100 attack, 1200 defense. As one per turn, this card cannot be sorted by battle, which is the best thing about it. When this face-up card is selected and attack target, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. So a bit of burn. I don't know why Naturia feels the need to burn instead of negating something, but apparently they're doing that now. This sort of gets into my previous criticism of Naturia as an archetype, where it's just trying to do like too much all at once. And so it basically just becomes a blah of cards, There's a bunch of cards that like don't really synergize as well as they'd like to. Mosquito is another new Naturia that is also not terrible or not as bad as some of the previous Naturias were. Is a level 1 Earth Insect, 200 attack, 300 defense. Says while you control another face-up Naturia monster or monsters, your opponent cannot select this card and attack target. Your opponent takes any battle damage you would have taken from battles involving a face-up Naturia monster control except this card. So another pseudo burn card there. However, I do want to point out that this is an insect, and there are some other Naturia insects as well. And Pineapple specifically says plant or beast monsters in your graveyard to actually bring this thing back. So if you want to play Pineapple, you have to get rid of all the insect Naturia monsters, and that's not even counting like Naturia Rock or like I don't know. Some of the design students around this time were just I don't know, it kind of boggles the mind, right? And to be fair, Pineapple is a TCG exclusive, so I lay that on the footsteps of the TCG design department there. But it's still kind of wild. Like I don't know, they could have just said, and you have no monster in your graveyard except for Naturia monsters, right? That would have encouraged you to play this in a Naturia deck, but nope, just plant or beasts. No insect Naturias for you. We also got Landoise's Luminous Moss. The normal spell, this is activate only if you control a face-up Naturia monster. The opponent's effect monsters cannot activate their effect this turn. So there's a sort of Dark Ruler No More before Dark Ruler No More. I don't think it's that necessary, but it's a card you can use if you want to, I guess. I guess if you've got this thing plus Bamboo Shoot, that's, a lock right there for a turn. Anyways, speaking of bad archetypes getting more support, we've also got Watts, which actually do get a little bit more coherent support than it previously had. I mean, I guess it was relatively coherent with its previous support, where it just wanted to get in and attack directly and get value off that. But here you actually get better things to do with that, I guess. Watt Pheasant is a level 4 Light Thunder, 1000 attack, 800 defense. So this card can attack your opponent directly. And then when this card inflicts battle damage, your opponent by direct attack, select one face of monster in the field and remove play until the end phase of this turn. You might be asking, why is that useful? Doesn't want monsters all attack directly? Well, some don't, like Watt Beta, level 2 Light Thunder Tuner, 100 attack, 0 defense. It says when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent by direct attack, your opponent discards one card of their choice. So the idea is you use Watt Pheasant, get in, banish an opponent's monster, and if that's the only monster they had, then you get in with Watt Beta, and you get rid of a card from their hand. Yes, they do get to choose which card they send, but still getting rid of a card from hand, I guess. Although I think it's probably just better to go into a level 6 tuner, or level 6 synchro, like Watt Chimera, which is a 1400 attack, 1200 defense point monster made with 1 Watt tuner and 1 or more non-tuner thunder monsters. And then this card can attack directly, and then if this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent by a direct attack, place 1 random card from your opponent's hand on top of their deck. So it's probably better to just do that instead of doing the Pheasant plus Beta combo. But if for whatever reason you want to get that thing engraved and not on top of deck, then I guess you go for this instead. That being said, this is less damage than the Chimera. So they're really encouraging you to go Chimera instead of doing this, but it's there if you want to. We also got Watt Scene, which is a continuous spell. It says when a Thunder type monster you control inflicts battle damage, your opponent gains life points equal to the damage inflicted. This is a way to sort of, refund your life points when you attack directly with things, which you'll probably need because your monsters are all weak and very easy to get over. Now, that being said, if your opponent gets over your monsters, not the end of the world, especially if they get over Walt Lemur, a level 2 Thunder, 800 attack, 100 defense. So if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by your opponent's card, either by battle or card effect, your opponent cannot conduct their battle phase next turn. So the idea is your opponent runs over Lemur. Next turn, you've got free reign to attack indirectly with your monsters. And I guess you get back a lot with Watsine, maybe as well. And then you potentially have stuff going on. But, I mean, it's just all too... it's all too ineffectual, right? It doesn't do enough. Yeah, it's just really bad. I get some of the vision, but given what other decks are doing, this thing is just not going to function. I don't think this thing would function in any previous era of the game. In fact, I don't think there's a power creep thing. I think this deck is just really bad. There's one more piece to it. Walk Cannon, a continuous trap. This is 1 per turn. When a level 4 lower light or a level 4 lower Thunder type monster in normal special summon to your field, inflict 600 damage to your opponent. So another bit of burn, I guess. So the idea is you're attacking directly with all your things, and you also got the burn going with this thing. But frankly, it's just not enough. There are better burn cards, especially at the glacial rate that the Watt deck will burn out your opponent. It's probably not worth it. Lastly, we got some one-offs for support. The most important being Malefic Thunder, Stardust Dragon. I've got Thunder in mind because of Watts. But this thing is used in certain beatdown decks. It's like Malefic Blue Eyes Dragon from previous formats, where, you know, it's 2500 attack, point monster, 2000 defense. Can be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from your hand by banishing 1 Stardust Dragon from your extra deck, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. There can only be 1 face-up Malefic monster on the field. Face-up field spells cannot be destroyed by card effects. Other monster you control cannot declare an attack, and then if there is no face-up field spell on the field, destroy this card. So this is basically like a better Earthbound Mortal. Just get in, beat in for a 2500 attack, you know, each turn, and that's something. You know, that's not terrible. So yeah, very easy to summon out, pretty good to beat down, and yeah, that's mainly the deck that you played in. Just a stun beat down deck. Next up, we got Fabled Support, Fabled Raven, level 2 Light Fiend Tuner, 1300 attack, 1000 defense, is 1 per turn. You discard any number of cards. If you do, this card gains 1 level and 4 attack for each discard card until the end of this turn. So Fables are not too upset about that because a lot of their effects trigger upon being discarded. And also this is just a modular, you know, level change. And so it's very easy to do. And so you can go into whatever synchros you might want to do. So that's not that bad. We've also got Allied Justice Cyclone Creator. Not really fitting with the Allied Justice theme of getting rid of the light monsters, but it is just an okay card in general. Level 3 Dark Machine Tuner. 1400 attack, 1200 defense, has 1 per turn. You can discard 1 card, return spell traps from the field to the hand equal to the number of tuners on the field. So there's just giant Tornade if you got a lot, or just you know, Spiritualism if you just got 1. Not terrible. Not really the best thing in the world either. Probably shouldn't see played in most decks, but maybe there's a weird edge case where you want this thing. Anyways, that's going to do it for the new archetypes, and all we got left are to discuss the sort of miscellaneous cards that were released in the set, some of which are actually some of the most important cards in the set, so I probably should have led with those, but I always like ending the video with the miscellaneous stuff. So let's dive into that now and see what the best and the worst of this set has to offer. So let's start with the best cards of this set, and by the best, I of course mean Drollbird, Key Mace, and Key Mace number 2. I mean, these normal monsters just are game-changing for sure. I mean, they're just more cards that came out like Alligator Sword, where they were in the OCG before. Now we're finally getting them into the TCG. I don't think these were actually in Duelist Revolution, although maybe some of them were, but I think they were more released as promos outside of it. Drollbird, though, you know, there is a card that will be using that, you know, relatively soon. That will become important later in the game's history. So keep an eye on Drollbird. May become important later. But the actual best cards in the set are definitely Pot of Duality, Solemn Warning, and Effect Veiler. And these are the cards that are the reason why people remember this set so fondly. Well, and Scrap Dragon, I'd say. But yeah, these cards, absolutely great, absolutely cracked. Some were very expensive at the time of release, and for good reason, because they help out a lot of decks, and they just definitely change the way the game is played for a lot of decks, just providing a bit more consistency, providing more ways to shut down what your opponent's doing. I mean, yeah, this set is one of the more influential sets of the 5Ds era, And, the reason why is encapsulated in these 3 cards. So let's dive into them, talk about what makes them so good. Pod Duality is a normal spell that says activate the top 3 cards of your deck. Add one of them to your hand. Also, after that, shuffle the rest back into your deck. You can only use one, or you can only activate one Pod Duality per turn. You cannot spell summon during the turn you activate this card. So, I talked about on the limit list and the ban list how they were trying to limit the consistency of certain decks, specifically. Pot of Duality is sort of a consistency booster for any deck in the game, right? If you play this thing, yes, you can special summon a turn, which is a lot worse for certain decks than others. But if you are a deck that doesn't mind not being able to special summon for a turn, and you just really want to get into a good card that you can use, Duality is great for that. This thing is absolutely cracked. And so many decks want to use this, whether it is a slower lockdown style deck, mid-range deck. There's so many different decks that want to use this thing. The game is definitely not at the point where like every deck is special summing out like a ton of things each turn, even though that can happen on a given turn. So you can take it slow for a turn, activate a Duality, get the best card on the top 3 cards of your deck, shovel away the 2 worst, and then just be prepared for what your opponent's going to do. So yeah, this thing shows up in a lot of decks from here on out, and for good reason. Solemn Warning is the next card here, a counter trap that is part of the Solemn Suite, as it would eventually be known, or the Solemn Brigade, I guess. That's what it was called. But this thing is very good at stopping a lot of what goes on in the Synchro era. It says when a monster or monsters be summoned, or when a spell or trap card or monster effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster, pay 2,000 life points, negate the summon or activation if you do destroy it. So this is basically able to stop the key point of your opponent's big plays in this format, stopping them from summoning out the monster that they need. And it being a counter trap, it's very hard to dodge around for a lot of decks. Also, unlike Solemn Warning, you only have to pay 2k to use this thing. So it's not as big of an investment, although it can be too big an investment compared to Warning, or to Judgment, that is. Because Judgment is just half your life points. You can use it whenever. This thing you can't, so it requires you to manage your life points a bit more closely than Judgment would. But this thing is extremely good. Shows up in most decks. One of the best removal cards in the game, even though it doesn't really do anything into an established board. The thing is still extremely, extremely strong. Effect Veiler is the last of these 3, and the one that sees probably the least amount of play in the early days of its release compared to the other 2. The thing is still very strong. It's a level 1 light spellcaster tuner. 0 attack, 0 defense. It says during your opponent's main phase, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, then target 1 effect monster your opponent controls, negate the effects of that face-up monster your opponent controls until the end of this turn. Now, is this the best hand trap in the game right now? That's debatable, because DD Crow exists and is maybe better than this thing against the decks that are best in this format. But Veiler is definitely a good card to know about, and certain decks will want to be using this. If not now, then very soon. And this thing will just get better and better as the game goes on. So it definitely deserves to be talked about in the same breath as Warning and Duality, even if it's not as played. And this thing can definitely shut down a turn just like Warning can. So it's still very good to know about. Of course, not the only hand trap that released in this set. Stronghold Guardian is another one. Not a very good one, but it is here. Is a level 4 warrior, 0 attack, 15 defense. So if a defense monster controls attack, you send this card from your hand to the graveyard during the damage step to have your attacked monster gain 15 defense until the end phase. But I said the best and the worst what this set had to offer. This doesn't even scratch the surface of the worst, but it's definitely in the conversation, Yeah, I mean, after these 3, most of the cards I'm going to talk about from here on out are pretty bad, but I'll try and tie them together in an interesting way for the most part. Speaking of cards activating places that they don't typically activate, we've also got Damage Eater, which activates from the graveyard. So a very telegraphed sort of trap, but it is one that your opponent might have to worry about if they're playing a burn deck. Level 2 Fiend, 1 attack, 8 defense. So during your opponent's turn, when your opponent would activate a card or effect that would inflict damage, you can remove from play this card in your graveyard to change that effect to increase his life points by the same amount instead. So, against burn decks, it can be pretty good, although Hanawata is probably a bit better. But, this thing is here if you want it. Not the only card that banishes itself from the graveyard, though. We also get AD Changer, a level 1 warrior, 1 attack, 1 defense, so that you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 monster in the field, change its battle position, which can be used to flip effect monsters, if you want to do an empty jar style deck, or to, switch your opponent's monster from attack to defense to attack over it. There are a lot of different ways that this can be used. You can also use switch the position of Earthquake Giant, level 5, 1600 attack, 200 defense point rock monster. It says once per turn, when the battle position of this card is changed, you select one monster your opponent controls and change the battle position. Is that really that good? Not really, but it's something that you can do with AD Changer if you want to, or just with Earthquake Giant on its own. There's also Barrier Wave if you want to switch the battle position of your opponent's monsters. A normal trap that says activate by triggering one synchro monster when your opponent's monster declares an attack. Change all attack position monster your opponent controls to defense position, then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attacking monster's defense. So, I mean, it's kind of a battle trap. There are better battle traps to use because this thing doesn't actually get rid of your opponent's monsters. You kind of have to do that on your next turn. Maybe using something like Blind Spot Strike, a quick play spell. This is select one face-up defense monster your opponent controls and one face-up attack position monster you control. The monster you control gains attack equal to the opponent's monster defense to the end phase. So you might have to use something like that depending on what the opponent's monster defense is, but at least it deals some burn damage as well. Blind Spot Strike is an okay card, but it's a bit too specific. If you want it as a battle trap, or it's just a card that changes attack and defense, I guess. Although I think it does provide a little bit more lore into the Six Samurai, because I think that's white ninja attacking maybe Shien. I don't know. I'm sure that there are lore videos that can dive into that a bit better. But you got to be careful to activate this thing in the damage step. Otherwise, Anti-Magic Prism could be used on it. It's a normal trap that says when your opponent activates a quick play spell, select one card on the field and destroy it. And so you don't necessarily want them to chain this outside the damage step and then destroy the monster that you're trying to use it on. Of course, Double Cyclone is a card that Anti-Magic Prism can be used on. Double Cyclone says, target one spell trap card you control, one spell trap card your opponent controls, destroy them. This card actually is a good card, even though it's in the middle of these sort of miscellaneous card list here. But I do think it's a bit more specific than some of the other generic good cards that I talked about earlier, as you kind of need a deck that can actually play into it a bit, having the back row to use with it and being fine with losing that back row. But you can also just use it after, you activate a trap or activate a spell, activate Double Cyclone, pop the activated spell or trap, and whatever your opponent has as well. So there are ways to use it like that. And so if you really want an extra copy of like MST for that, you can do that, but it is a bit more specific than MST. So, but again, certain decks do like to use this. Of course, there's also Chain Whirl when if we're talking about spell and trap removal. A normal trap that says activate only when a card on the field is destroyed by a card effect. There's like two spell or trap cards on the field and destroy them. Is this the best spell and trap removal? I would say not, because it's more reactive than proactive, but it is here if you want to use it. There are some spells that, would stick around that can be kind of annoying to deal with. So Cursed Armament is the main one, although funnily enough, Double Cyclone and Chain Whirlwind don't really deal with it that well. It's an equip spell that says the equipped monster loses 600 attack for each monster you control. When this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls equipped with this card. So it's kind of like Flint, if you know that card from earlier Yu-Gi-Oh!, where it's an equip spell that basically keeps moving among your opponent's monsters. And so it's kind of hard for your opponent to deal with. Of course, it sort of deals with attack monsters, while Blind Spot Strike deals with defense monsters. But it can be pretty decent depending on how many monsters you control, I guess, and whether they can get over your opponent's weakened monster. But unfortunately, if you're activating Double Cyclone on it, unfortunately, it doesn't really do much. Unless it's your own card, right, and you're using Double Cyclone to pop it in an opponent's thing, and then it comes back, that's not that bad. But otherwise, if you're trying to get rid of it, it can be a bit tough. Now, moving on the banished side of things, because, we did talk about these banished cards there. We've got DD Unicorn Knight, which maybe I should have talked about in the B section, because it is a unicorn. So maybe it's meant to be used with, like, Monoceros and all that stuff. Although I would say that, like, something like, Parallel Selection is meant to be used with Monoceros, because this allows you to, basically bring back a banished spell card and add to your hand when a synchro monster control is destroyed. So maybe that's meant to pair with that. But DD Unicorn Knight can also pair with those banished sort of decks. It can be normal summon or set, 1800 attack, 900 defense, and it can only be spell summoned if your opponent controls a monster or monsters, and you control a face-up tuner monster or monsters. When this card is spell summoned this way, you can select one of your removed from play at level 3 or lower non-tuner monster and spell summon it, but its effects are negated, and you can't normal summon or set the turn you spell summon this card. So, it's another way to extend, I guess, but I'm not really sure how this fits into the unicorn ladder. I don't really think it does. So, that's why I put it here. Yeah, it's kind of more of a miscellaneous card to use than a non-miscellaneous card. I mean, it's further extension, I guess. if you want to play a synchro deck that banish things as well, but it's not really that good, especially because it costs your normal summon. Another DD monster, though, as well, DD Destroyer, which for some reason is a warrior, despite looking like the most fiendish monster I've ever seen. Level 4 Earth Warrior, 1000 attack, 1000 defense. Says when this card on the field is banished, you can target one face-up card your opponent controls and destroy that target. So, if you manage to banish this thing, then you can pop something, and maybe you want to use something like Unibird to banish it. Level 2 Winged Beast, 1 attack, 6 defense. Said you can remove from play this card and one face-up monster you control. Select one synchro monster in your graveyard with a level less than or equal to the combined original levels of the other two monsters. Special summon that synchro monster. I could have mentioned this in the beast section of the video, because this is a Winged Beast, but I felt like covering it here instead, because I feel like there's more of a generic card than a Winged Beast card specifically. Or, a card that factors into the unicorn laddering and banishing and all that stuff. Yeah, it doesn't really fit in my mind. Although I guess I will say, if you got like Thunder Unicorn and this thing, it goes into a Voltic Bicorn from Grave. Or if you have Voltic Bicorn in this thing, it goes into a Lightning Tricorn from Grave. So that's something. But it's just kind of awkward, I think, overall. So not really the best. But, maybe you could play it in a non-beast style deck and just generically bring back something. I don't know. Maybe with the DD Destroyer, you also pop card in field. Maybe there's something there. Probably not, but maybe. In the theme of banishing cards you control, we've also got Paradox Fusion, a counter trap that says when a monster or monsters be spell summoned, or a spell or trap card is activated, banish one face-up fusion monster you control, negate the spell summon or activation if you do destroy that card. Also, during a second end phase, return the banned fusion monster to your field in face-up attack position. So, kind of a neat effect there. I'm not really sure what decks that are playing a bunch of fusion monsters would really want to use this, but it's something you can do if you have a deck like that. I don't know, it seems kind of awkward, but maybe you want to play it. We've also got Chivalry here, another counter trap on the counter trap theme. This is more of a counter trap that's targeted at Gladbeasts, although there are other decks that does hit as well. The counter trap says activate only during the battle phase. When the effect of an opponent's effect monster is activated, negate the activation and destroy that card. So very good against Gladiator Beasts, of course. There are some other decks, like actually X-Sabers can struggle against this if they're using like an Ember's Blade. You chain this and stop the Ember's Blade from something out. But yeah, this thing is just a generic card to have in your side deck, so that's pretty good in that regard. Now, speaking of specific deck counters, we've also got Light of Destruction, which is clearly meant to be a counter to Lightsworn in some capacity, even though it's the worst counter to Lightsworn I've ever seen. So you can do a strap that says when an opponent's card effect sends a card or cards from their deck to the graveyard, send the top 3 cards of their deck to the graveyard. That is something that decks want to do, right? If your opponent had a deck that's sending cards from their deck to the graveyard, they want to send cards from the deck to the graveyard. So, like, Light of Destruction just furthers their game plan. I get the idea where it's like, okay, this makes Lightsworn, like, deck out further, but also gets them their win con further. So, like, I don't know, it's just really bad card. I like that they did the callback to the set name, and they also used the Realm of Light here, but a destroyed Realm of Light to provide the art. I thought that was a cool callback as well. But it's just an awful, awful card in general. But if we're talking about counters, continuing that trend, we've got Mystical Ref panel here as well. A normal trap that says activate only when a spell card that targets one player is activated. The effect of that spell card is applied to the other player instead. We finally get to the ref panel and the ref panel list, which is a list of cards that ref panel can be used on. Yes, this thing is weird. The ruling swords are weird. You're never going to play it in a deck, so it doesn't really matter. Although there are some formats where people actually do tech this in. Like I'm thinking about some Dragon Ruler formats where this actually works on 7... the Star Sword thing that you banish the dragons with. I forget the name of it, but this does work on that. So something to know about for those formats, but for this format won't really matter here. Now, since we mentioned Paradox Fusion, we kind of went on a tangent there, but there are some other ways to search it with Synchro Fusionist, a level 2 spellcaster, 800 attack, 600 defense. If this card is sent to the graveyard as a Synchro Material monster, you can add one spell card from your deck to your hand with Polymerization or Fusion in the card name, except for Diffusion Wave Motion. So you can use this thing with Paradox Fusion to make some stuff happen. I know that it can also do some crazy stuff with Dimension Fusion, but Dimension Fusion, I'm pretty sure it's banned in this format, so it can't really do much there. But kind of a cool card to think about regardless. Next up, we've got Monster Eye. Monster Eye is a fiend that says you can pay 1,000 life points, add one Polymerization from your graveyard to your hand. So this is kind of like, Stinger Fusionist, but much, much worse. And, maybe if you would make a feud monster with this thing, it would be better. Maybe there is one that you can make with it. I don't quite know. But on its own, this thing is pretty bad. And feud decks in general at this time period are pretty bad. Next, we got Summoning Curse. Speaking of summoning methods, there's a continuous spell that says if a monster or monsters is special summoned, the current controller of that monster or monsters banishes one card from their hand. And then once per turn during your end phase, pay 500 life points to destroy this card. So, if you want to basically fight a war of attrition with your opponent, and maybe you're playing a deck that doesn't special summon as much, this card could potentially be good. But the 500 life point at the end of the turn is kind of annoying. And it being a continuous spell and not really the most protectable thing is also kind of rough. And there's better floodgates that you could play in general than this thing. So not really worth playing. But if you do play it, you could also consider playing the Ambitious Gopher, which could probably make use of your opponent having a lot less cards in hand. And level 6 Fiend, opponent for an attack, 1 on defense, says once per turn, you can target up to 2 monster opponent controls. Opponent can reveal 1 monster in their hand and negate this card's effect. Otherwise, destroy those monsters. So if your opponent has no card in hand, then this can be very good. Otherwise, it's not really going to be that good. Also, your opponent has to have a fairly wide field to get a lot of use out of this. But maybe they will. There are some other cards in this format that like your opponent having a wide field, like Rhinotaurus, which is a level 4 Beast Warrior, so you can use it with Horn of the Phantom Beast. 1800 attack, 600 defense. If 2 or more of your opponent's monsters are supported by battle with your monsters during the same battle phase, this card can make a second attack during that battle phase. So that's kind of neat. But is it that good? Maybe if you get Horn of the Phantom Beast on this thing, but it's kind of situational outside that. So I would say not really that good. But if you do want to make your own wide board, we've also got Trident Warrior here, level 4 Light Warrior, 1800 attack, 1200 defense. And that says when this card normal summoning, you can special summon 1 level 3 monster from your hand. Level 3 exactly has note, so not level 3 or lower. But there are some good level 3s that you can bring out, like Delta Flyer, level 3 Dragon Tuner, 1500 attack, 900 defense. This is 1 per turn. You can select 1 other face-up monster control and increase its level by 1. So this means that you can go into a 7 or an 8 off Trident Warrior and Delta Flyer, which is not bad at all. You can also go into Dash Warrior off Trident Warrior, although this thing is much worse than Delta Flyer. It's a level 3 warrior, effect monster, 600 attack, 1200 defense. If this card attacks, it gains 1200 attack during the damage step only. I don't really know why you do this over just an 1800 vanilla, but it's here if you want it. And yes, I do know there are some reasons, like it gets under gravity bind, it gets under level limit. Realistically, this thing is not really that good. But it's here, and makes for a funny play with Trident Warrior, I guess. Last 3 cards, I couldn't really find a good way to fit into them anywhere else, but they all share sort of a graveyard recursion effect, so that's kind of neat. Wise Man Chalice is a normal spell. This is if you control no monsters, select 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, spell summon it. It cannot be tributed or used as a synchro material monster, and then during the end phase of this turn, give control of that special summon monster to your opponent. It's a really bad card, especially in a format with Monster Reborn. Yes, the thing is not limited, but it's not limited because it's really bad. You're giving your opponent a monster for free if you don't kill them that turn. And given that the monster can't be tributed or use synchro material, it might be a bit tough to kill them that turn with that. Unless they had a really big monster that was in the graveyard and then you're able to get it back. But if they had a really big monster, then it's a bit too situational, I think. But you don't necessarily want to let your opponent get into the very big monsters. Like a lot of decks don't want to let their opponent do that at all. And so this thing is just kind of already admitting defeat on that front and then saying, okay, and if we've admitted defeat on that front and they've gotten rid of all our monsters, then we can maybe bring back for 1 turn and do something, which is not really that good. Miracles make it a little bit better. To normal trap says target 1 monster that was destroyed by battle instead of the graveyard this turn. Special summon it. So that is pretty good. Because you get to bring back 1 of your monsters destroyed by battle. So, you get to bring it back, do stuff with it next turn. I mean, I don't know. There's not really much to say beyond that. So, pretty decent. Is it going to see playing decks? I don't think so. It is still situational compared to something like Monster Reborn, Call the Haunter, things like that. But, it's a card, so it's not terrible. Reanimation Wave is the last card I'm going to talk about here. A normal trap that says activate only when your opponent's monster declares a direct attack. Select 1 synchro monster in your graveyard with a level less than or equal to the attacking monsters. The battle damage you take from that attack is halved, and then at the end of the damage step, summon the selected synchro monster from the graveyard. So this is very good at bringing back certain synchro monsters if you're able to bring that back. However, it kind of relies on your opponent having a big monster, just like Wise Man's Chalice does. Because if you want to bring back a synchro monster that's actually worth, bring back, your opponent's probably going to have a monster that is above a level 4, probably above like a level 6. which is a bit of an ask sometimes. And if your opponent's already got that monster, then you're probably in a pretty bad spot and can't necessarily use Reanimation Wave anyways, because maybe they went into Scrap Dragon, popped your back row, or something like that. Like, there are many situations where you're not going to be able to even activate Reanimation Wave because your opponent's got a big enough monster that they've shut it down already. So, yeah, I don't think this thing is that good, but it's here if you want to play around with it. And that's going to do it for all the new cards added to X-Saber Format that make it X-Saber Format. Before closing out the video, I want to dive into, just a quick sampler deck list, so that way you can get, a deck that you can start playing if you want to just dive into the format right away. But I will be covering some other decks on the channel in the near future. So look forward to those. Subscribe if you want to see when those come out, because I've had a bit of a sporadic release schedule of late. Hopefully it will get a bit less sporadic in the new year. That's one of my resolutions. Anyways, let's dive into the deck list. Okay, this deck list is by Shabam XEXEX. A frequent player of formats around this time period. Very good duelist in these formats. And this is the latest winner of the latest X-Saber Format tournament. Now, the tournament did only have 16 players, which I do always like to mention, because I think it is important to say that what works in a small event might not work as well in a large event. But I do think this is a pretty good X-Saber deck to start off with if you want to play X-Saber in this format. Now, I will say, in terms of my own video coverage, I actually am planning on not starting with X-Sabers. I do think X-Saber is a bit of a tricky deck to play. The main reason to play it in this format is because X-Saber Dark Soul gets to trigger multiple times in Grave, which is very nice. But I will say the deck is kind of tricky. It's like definitely non-linear at different times, and knowing like when to push and how to push with it can be a lot trickier than some other decks in the format. So I'm going to sort of cut my teeth on the format with some of the less tricky decks, and then come back to X-Saber later on when I feel more comfortable here. But I think this deck is a great place to start if you want to start with it. And I'll probably be starting with this as my deck list when I play some X-Saber in this format in the future. I actually played X-Saber in the YFGO from Zero tournament that we held on the Discord server, again linked in the description down below. And I did not do that well with X-Saber. So I think I do want to take some time to, get more of a handle on the format before I dive into this deck itself. But I do think it's a really good deck. If you want a good X-Saber deck, I think that there are a lot of neat optimizations here and a lot of neat tech cards as well. Like the Swallow Flips in the side deck is definitely not a card I would have thought of, but is a very cool card against a variety of decks. And yeah, I just think this deck is overall really good, and a very good example of a great deck in this format. But that's going to do it for the video. Let me know what you think about this format down in the comments below, and whether you're looking forward to my exploration of it. Also, as always, I got to end out with some special shout outs to my patrons. So big thanks for you to supporting me this way and encouraging me to make more videos like this one, because I definitely need to get back on that video Megan horse. And knowing that I've got the patrons who are looking forward to my videos definitely helps with that. So big shout outs to Damon Hess, Scout Zero, Tyler Compton, Dump Truck, Pork Chop Coon, GMYFS, Bren Donker, and Rinswin. Thanks again for your continued support, and hopefully I'll have more videos to actually, make that support more worth it this month. That should be the plan. I think it should be a doable plan, and we should be having a fair amount of X-Saber videos coming out shortly. So I hope that you all enjoy those when they come out, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. Yeah, have a great one, and I shall see you next time. Peace.